Hello and welcome back to yet another Dominion Menagerie bonus preview. We're on day 10, and given that the set was initially slated to come out on the 18th, we might be pretty close to done with these previews, although I do plan to go over the entire set once that releases. However, with everything that's been going on with the coronavirus stuff, I don't actually know if the set's coming out on time or what the deal is with that, but I guess we'll find out one way or another. In any case, today we are looking at Cardinal, a 4-cost action attack, which gives you +2 coins, and each other player reveals the top 2 cards of their deck, exiles 1 costing from 3 to 6, and discards the rest. So this is very much the Dame Sylvia of exile attacks, I guess. I mean, I don't know that that there are any other attacks that work in a similar fashion, but yeah, it's very similar to Dame Sylvia. The difference being that it's exiling instead of trashing, which does certainly matter. But the high concept is pretty much the same. I will say that the picture of the Cardinal really captures this guy looking like a smug jerk, so good job to the artist on that. Anyway, so in general, Knights are definitely not my favorite card. The fact that this is going to be a pile of all the same attack rather than some being significantly better or worse depending on like the board and the and what what you need in your deck and that sort of thing is definitely that part is definitely good. The part that's maybe not well, and I guess the other part that's good is that you can get the cards back for the most part. The part that's potentially not good is like unlike the Knights pile, which basically destroys itself over time, and thus you eventually get to kind of stop dealing with it. That is not going to be the case with Cardinal necessarily. I mean, it could. Right, the Cardinals could end up exiling themselves, but there's no particular reason to expect that they will, and it's not mutual destruction, which means you could end up in the scenario where one person has a Cardinal and the other doesn't. How much does that matter? Well, that gets back to the question of how often are you going to end up in a situation where you can't actually get the cards back. And that basically, like, if once a pile empties, you can't gain a card from there anymore, then you can't discard the copies that you have from exile. So that's the situation where the attack really starts to hurt. That being said, it's not like the attack doesn't hurt before that, because like even if like okay, so you got your nice 5-cost action, whatever it is, that you want to play, and then the Cardinal exiles it. You're like, dang, okay, well, let me get another one, and now I discarded it from exile, and that didn't hurt too much. Well, I mean, it didn't hurt as badly as losing it entirely, but you didn't get to play it. You were probably potentially going to buy another copy of the card anyway. So, I mean, it definitely did just, like, make it, at the very least, like, miss a shuffle. And then, of course, if it's a card that you didn't want multiple copies of, that might actually hurt worse because, like, now you have to get the second copy in order to get the first copy back. I guess you can just leave the second copy on the exile mat. So it doesn't necessarily hurt in that sense, because, like, the discard from exile is optional. But in having to get a second copy, you've now been slowed down just as much as you would have if it had been trashed. So, like, in that case, it's just as bad as if it had been trashed. So, yeah, it's I mean, it's definitely not going to be, like, in general as strong an attack as the Knight attack, but it's still definitely going to be painful to deal with. Donald X pointed out in his preview text that you, at some point in the game, you wanted to hit your duchies, which is true enough, I suppose. And that is a potentially significant difference. Most of the time, this isn't going to be like super relevant, but The fact that your cards are getting exiled rather than trashed does mean that you still have them for scoring purposes. So obviously that matters for Duchy, but it can also matter for things like Palace, or like if you get your silver or gold exiled, or for like Tower, or for Orchard, or Triumphal Arc, or any of those other things that like care about the composition of your deck. You're for like Gardens, Silk Road. Cardinal doesn't threaten your points for any of those in the way that Knights can. So it's definitely, the attack is definitely much more about how it affects your, like, what your deck can do and your tempo, than it is about like threatening your score, because it just doesn't do that at all. Yeah, so I guess, how strong of an attack do I think this is going to be? Well, I do think that there's, like, it's going to be easier to accumulate and play a bunch of these relative to Knights by at least a little bit, just because they only cost 4. And they also, like, the benefit that they give you is always at least a little bit relevant, which is not always true of the Knights. Like, sometimes you have Dame Josephine, who doesn't give you any kind of benefit. Sometimes you have Servander, who, doesn't give you any on-play benefit. Sometimes you don't want to trash anything with Dame Anna. So, anyway, the, like, and I think this could be pretty brutal in the situation where you can get and play a whole bunch of them at once. Especially if you can establish like a lead in the Cardinals, where like you, like, unlike the Knights, that it's like asymmetrical, and the pile empties, and now they can't get any more Cardinals, and you can just keep beating up on them. I don't know, like, I guess I don't know how often that's going to come up. And in the general case, or if that doesn't happen, if you can't play a whole bunch of these, I tend to think it's not going to be that strong of an attack compared to Knights. Just the fact that you can get the card back, it does hurt your tempo, but like, it doesn't hurt as badly as the Knights, because you can get it back, and also, like, you have the choice of whether to do that or not. So, like, in some cases, you're actually, potentially going to be like accelerated. If you, like, let's say that you have like a silver trash and you didn't want the silver anymore, or you have like a, like a steward or something that you were using to trash cards, that you didn't want around anymore. With Knights, when they hit a card like that, I mean, it's certainly, nice, like, right, to have lost something that you didn't want around anyway. But like, then the other part of the attack, when they actually trash your good stuff, is stronger. The fact that, like, for the Cardinal, that like part of the attack where it helps your opponent does just as much of that as it does with Knights, but then the actual attack is weaker. Like, I guess where I'm going with this is, I think this is going to be less of a must-have than Knights, and not that Knights are always like a must-have, but they are on a fair number of boards, like, just something that you can't avoid playing with. I think this is going to be less the case with Cardinal. I think it's going to be more often the case that you don't need to invest in getting Cardinals, but I'm not confident in that. Well, it's because a lot of it comes down to that, the rate at which you can get the cards back out of exile, and the frequency with which you get to a point where you can't get the cards back out of exile, and like the frequency with which the card you want to get back out of exile is one you don't want multiples of, so you just have to, like, get another one, and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's like, it's tricky to get, a feel for it without having played. But my my unconfident first guess is that this is going to be less like not just less oppressive than knights, but like less mandatory as well. And I hope that's the case because I don't find knights to be very fun. But we shall see. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I at least expect to be back with another one of these tomorrow. After that, only time will tell.